I haven't heard anybody else talking about this, but this is brand rescue. What happens when an aggregator tanks your brand? And what was the very first red flag our guest saw and he realized the aggregator might not be handling his brand properly? What steps were taken to stabilize it? And what should sellers watch out for when they're selling their brand to an aggregator? Our guest today has been in the e-commerce game since 2016 when he founded Beast Gear, which he rapidly scaled and then exited in 2019 to the now infamous Thrasio. And Beast Gear was the first Thrasio European aggregator deal. Okay, our guest today, after selling his brand, Ben decided to continue building brands, advising others, speaking on stages around the world, and he published his first book, Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand. Recently, Ben bought back his first brand, which was just a shadow of what it looked in its former self. He's documenting the turnaround publicly on YouTube, and I just heard about this, and I can't wait to watch that YouTube series. So I'm talking about a good friend of mine, Ben Leonard. We couldn't do this podcast without the support of our sponsors. So first of all, thank you, Seller Board. Thank you, AZ Rank, Sophie Society, Titan Network, and Connect Cash. Now, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy the show. And welcome back. I don't know if this is your third or fourth time, Ben, but Ben Leonard.
Hey, good to be here, Norm. You know what? I think it might be like 6 or 7.
Really?
But there's been a long gap since the last one. I went through this period of I was on your show every week for a little while.
Yeah.
But it's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. And the topic today, I don't know if you've been on a lot of other podcasts talking about it, but this is definitely a topic that I think everybody should hear because back in COVID days, 2021, this was going crazy. People were getting crazy multiples for their business. Oh, yeah. Everybody was selling. It didn't matter if you had a brand or not. I mean, if you had a product on Amazon, you were getting offers. Pretty much anybody I talked to got an offer. But what happened then? Things turned around and all of a sudden, it wasn't favorable for a hell of a lot of companies. So let's start there. What happened? What was the turnaround? Why the turnaround?
It's been a wild ride. So this whole thing started in 2018, September 2018 in Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts somewhere near Wall Street. A bunch of financial dudes walked into Dunkin' Donuts, had a meeting, and thrashed out this idea whereby, it's not a new idea, the roll-up idea. Mm-hmm. They knew that right across the internet, e-commerce businesses, primarily on Amazon, were generating a lot of money. Many of them were very simple to run, and many of them were just owned by regular people like us. And they said, we can buy these for 2 to 3x, scale them, and together they will be worth more than the sum of their parts. And eventually, we can sell the whole thing on or go public. It was arbitrage, right? They said, look, the moment we buy these, they're worth more than yesterday. Because if we buy Norm's business, Ben's business, Kelsey's business, all for 3x and put them together, they're no longer just worth 3x. The multiple will go up because it's a positive feedback loop. The bigger the business, generally speaking, the higher the multiple. And on paper, that works. Nothing wrong with it. And it can work in real life too. But unfortunately, Thrasio and others, and it's been well documented, kind of made a bit of a dog's breakfast of it. And it all went a bit wrong. But before it went wrong, it went crazy, like you said. So
crazy.
They started in September 2018. They bought my business, Halloween 2019, and then COVID hit. A lot of people bet at that time that was it. That was the catalyst, and there was no going back. E-commerce was here to stay. E-commerce was going to become commerce, and bricks and mortar was going to trail off. That didn't quite come to be. Suddenly, tons of money came pouring into the space. Private equity money came pouring into the space. All these other aggregators cropped up, and they were spending ridiculous amounts of money on very, very mediocre businesses. People with really poor businesses that were just selling junk on Amazon with no real idea how to run a business were getting very high multiples and getting very rich, and more power to them. Like, hey, good on them. Like, I have nothing against that. But unfortunately, so many of these aggregators couldn't really run the businesses. They didn't understand the model. They were unable to hire the talent. They were unable to do it at scale. The whole thing got away from them, and it got too big too soon. They ran into all sorts of difficulties, particularly with supply chain, especially around COVID. But one of the big problems that I saw, and I saw it firsthand with my brand, was that they failed to recognize that it wasn't just, you couldn't just gamify this. This wasn't just a paint by numbers, copy cookie cutter thing with all these brands. Each brand, the ones that were real brands, had its own soul. They sucked that out of it. And they were unable to replicate the clever things that the founders and their teams were doing, which made them a success in the first place. And so you would buy a business, immediately stop doing all the good stuff that made it work, and then scratch your head and wonder why it's not working anymore.
Right. Yeah. And, when I was able to take a look at a couple of the different portfolios that these aggregators had, I was privy to some of these portfolios, and what I saw was a hot mess. And I said it back in the day, like, how are they doing this? Nothing is making sense. They're not leveraging a specific niche. You could be selling garlic presses, dog food, babies. It was just all in there. And it seemed like it could be any size of business. And I know back at that time, I was doing a lot of work with Private Label Legion, Tim Jordan.
Yep.
And we were looking at it saying, how's this going to, just keep going? How's it going to exist? And sure enough, somebody pulled their finger out of the dike and it exploded. It imploded very quickly. Why do you think it imploded?
I mean, a whole variety of reasons. For starters, the aggregators began to find that they couldn't sustain the growth. They couldn't replicate what was working at a smaller scale for those individual brands at scale. They didn't have the talent, particularly on the marketing side, because the talent didn't want to go work for them. The talent wanted to build a brand and then sell it. Or they simply couldn't afford the talent who was all working for top D2C agencies. That's where they failed. And a huge part of it was supply chain as well. They got, so many of them got way over leveraged on inventory. I know that firsthand. When we bought our brand back, we had to liquidate an eye-watering, almost seven-figure value of inventory because they were so over leveraged. They just could. It got away with them. It was a runaway train with no brakes. You're right. A lot of it was a hot mess. It was a total mishmash of random stuff. The thing is, though, that there's always a lesson to be learned. It's like evolution. It's natural selection. So many of those aggregators that went through that and died, they were the canary in the coal mine. And now we do actually have aggregators who exist now. They hate to be called aggregators. They want to be called digital brand houses, they actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because rather than being financial guys who went and raised a bunch of money to buy e-commerce businesses, they're actually e-commerce guys who raised a bunch of money to buy e-commerce businesses. And they know what they're doing. They're doing it at a sustainable scale, and they're staying within niche, and it makes way more sense. And they understand, some of the aggregators didn't know what they had an identity crisis. Are we buying brands, or are we just buying stuff and calling it a brand? Like, Thrasio's tagline was something along the lines, or they made this tagline towards the end, was something like along the lines of like where brands become great. It was a little bit of a ripoff of Good to Great by Jim Collins, and I thought, but no, they don't. Like, this is where brands go to die. Like, you guys don't have a clue what branding is. This is just selling crap on Amazon. That just was never going to work. But it can work if it's done right. It's like anything. You can do it badly or you can do it well.
I'll give you a great example. Want more unfiltered tips from top e-commerce experts? Well, hit subscribe and you'll never miss a Lunch with Norm episode. The Pattern Method. Pattern is an incredible company. They work with brands, they buy brands, but their model is completely different than what we're talking about. They want you to grow your brand, and they're there with all their tools to help you go from a $5 million brand to a $50 million brand, and they're helping everybody along the way.
Yeah.
It's a incredible model. If you haven't checked out Pattern, by the way, anybody who's listening right now, just check them out. The brands that they have, the brands that I know of that they've acquired, it's always beneficial to the owner, the founder of the brand. And they don't just sell it right off. They don't want to be the expert in your niche. They want you to be the expert in your niche and you grow together with them, which is a completely
Yeah.
different model than what was happening before.
You're totally right, Norm, and that's where so many of the aggregators got it painfully wrong. Is speaking from my own experience, I was desperately trying to teach them how to do all the cool stuff I had done,
Mhm.
and I was for free, and I was very happy to go teach their teams how to do it, to cross pollinate it across all their brands. Now, this particular aggregator who brought my business had bought something north of 200. I think it was quite a specific number, like 213 brands or something. So there was all that knowledge there from all these founders which they could use and just didn't.
Yeah.
It was an arrogance is what it was. Now,
But there's a lot of brains. Like some of these aggregators, they recruited some really top-notch people.
Oh yeah. I mean,
But
also some crazy decisions though in the end, Norm. Like for
yeah,
example, take Thrasio. They recruited Moyes, who sold native. This was, when things were very publicly going very wrong. They recruited him at a very high level, and I'm just thinking, well, he's a really smart dude, but what's he gonna do? You need boots on the ground, talented brand managers to actually get in there and do cool, nimble, tactical stuff. And that to me was just like the horse had already bolted at that point.
mhm.
And so I think they did hire smart people, but they weren't able to do that at every level of the ladder.
I guess there's a huge difference between a company that has a Fortune 500 mentality and, a Harvard MBA or an MIT tech grad compared to a MBA, like I got it on the streets. And that's what
Yeah,
most of Amazon sellers are street smart.
exactly. It's that street smart, hustle, very scrappy, fight for every dollar mentality. And there needs to be some joined up thinking to allow the brands to keep operating in a semi-independent way, whilst ultimately they're all part of the same larger machine. But hey, look, don't get me wrong. I love Thrasio. I'm very
Mhm.
fond of Thrasio. They changed my life for the better. The way I kind of view them now is, I mean, what's left of it, I feel like sort of a disappointed parent who's upset because their teenager, went out of their way and didn't listen. But I'll always have a lot of affection and fondness for Thrasio. They were pioneers. They were trying to do something cool. They didn't execute it quite right, but they were trying to do something cool, and they did set a trend. I do feel sorry for some brand owners who didn't get earnouts. And that's not specific to Thrasio. That's across
Right
the.
across the board.
In fact, there
Yeah.
were some legal cases whereby, and I don't know who was involved off the top of my head, but whereby sellers sued the buyers, the aggregators, because they felt that they had been neglectful in their operation of the business, which meant to earn out targets not being hit. And I believe in some cases the sellers won, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I have a close friend of mine where he got bought out by an aggregate with a huge earnout, and that was the thing too. People were just jumping at these earnouts and or just closing these deals without really thinking it through. There were so many possible
Oh yeah.
ways to do it better, and so he wakes up one day and there's just skids, pallets of inventory just dropped off at his warehouse, and just here, take it back. And he missed out on a $5 million earnout. He had to just take
Oh,
back all the inventory. So it was crazy. Either take it back or that's it. You're not going to get anything. So yeah,
painful.
yeah. But
Yeah.
let's just do a kind of a rapid fire here. So what were some we already touched it on it, but like what are 3 or 4 red flags that you look at when you're that you're realizing that your brand is just going bad? Like it's just not handled properly.
I mean, the most obvious one that you can sort of see is negative reviews. The negative reviews are popping up. And well, why is that? Because the product quality ought not to have changed. But what was happening was that the systems that I had in place to provide excellent customer service,
Mhm.
both on Amazon, but also social media, email, etc., chatbots, was all starting to break down. And lack of joined up thinking. So, for instance, somebody decided one day that the majority of the revenue is coming through Amazon, so we're just going to turn off the website without thinking of the repercussions of that, because the website served as a hub of knowledge. It served as something that positioned the brand as an authority in the niche. It actually drove sales on Amazon because it built the brand as an authority. But not only that, but the website had all the URLs attached to it, which were in all the inserts in the product packaging, where people could go get user guides, video guides, would end up in chatbot flows, etc. So now people are buying a product on Amazon, ending up at an error 404 page, and of course now they're going to go leave a negative review. Things like that. Email marketing turned off. No thought for second order consequences. So those were huge red flags.
We talk about this a lot on the podcast, is brand consistency. So if you go over and go to a web page and it just looks a little funky, you're a micro brand. You're not a household name. You're a micro brand. And people are going, why am I getting this 404? Or if you go to your social media and you haven't posted in a month, this triggers that red flag that, hey, I'm checking out somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. So episode 3 of Brand Rescue Mission, I go into a lot of these exact specifics, like you mentioned, they're not posting on social. So towards the end, I recorded a 30-minute screencast for the team that was managing my brand, basically calling them out on all their absolute nonsense. I haven't put the whole thing in episode 3, but a significant portion of it is so that people can really see the stuff that was going on. And people will, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, right? So you better just watch it and laugh. It's that kind of stuff, that kind of level of incompetence, and that's not unique to me. That happened right across the industry.
You were one of these scrappy entrepreneurs that saw your brand tank and you bought it back. So can we talk about that process?
Everything I'm saying is public domain, right? And like I said, I harbor no ill will towards Thrasio. In fact, like I said, I'm very, very fond of Thrasio.
Mm-hmm.
When it became public that they were in trouble with the layoffs that were occurring several years ago, I contacted them and I said, look, is there a world in which you sell this back to me? And the short answer was no. It's not in our plan to sell any brands. Steadying the ship, we're going to be fine. And over time, as publicly the situation clearly was becoming worse, I backed and forth with them a bit about this until eventually they said, yeah, we could do that. We've only ever sold one brand back to anyone. No, I don't think it's like they only ever sold one brand, but we're open to it. Let's make it work. And then they changed their minds because rapidly things got worse, and they decided they needed to basically fire sale entire groups of brands at a time. And so they were only willing to sell me my brand if I bought like 20 others, which of course I could not do. However, some colleagues of mine in the industry, and they don't wish to be public as part of Brand Rescue Mission, so I won't name them. They were in a position to acquire one of these groups of brands, which included mine. And so they directly bought the brands, and I did a deal with them whereby I am involved with B-Skier, and which is my brand, the brand that I sold. And that is the subject of the Brand Rescue Mission. And so now I believe Thrasio had, like I said earlier, north of 200 brands. I believe it's in the region of 50, maybe even fewer now. Mm-hmm. I still occasionally get letters in the mail related to the bankruptcy. That's kind of where they are. They still have and I actually think that, a core of, 20 to 50 brands, and I use the word brand here loosely only because that seems to be the vernacular we're using. I don't think any of these really would qualify as a real brand. I think they could make that work. They have done a good job quite famously with some of them. Take, for example, their, the one that everyone talks about, Angry Orange.
Yep.
And I hope that they can make that work.
That's great. Now, when I think about you buying back a brand, so it's kind of reversed. I knew B-Skier before it was sold, and it had a great name. And then all of a sudden it starts to tank. You decide to go and grab it, but there's a hell of a lot of work to be done to help stabilize and bring back that brand because it's tanking. So what did you do? How did you stabilize?
Yeah. Well, so when we sold the brand, it was doing approximately $6 million in revenue. Somewhere in the region of £4 to £4.5 million. The trailing 12 months when we got it back was $500,000. So it was way, way down. And like I said, extremely over leveraged on inventory. We had all this inventory sitting in 3PLs in the UK, and we were selling in the UK and mainland Europe, and a small amount in Australia and the Middle East. When I sold it, Thrasio took it out of there, and it was not sustainable to hold on to that inventory. We were going to have to liquidate it. So we had to liquidate somewhere in the region of 800 grand's worth of inventory. And sure, the business got money for that, but obviously very, very knocked down. And so the pain we have there now is that there are resellers all over our listings, but we had to do that. Next, it's all about stabilization of our losses, and that meant really tightening our belts on things like PPC. The next obvious thing, at this point, of course, the website didn't exist. Website gone, email marketing list of tens of thousands of people disappeared down the toilet, which would have been pretty handy for a relaunch. And so it was all just about, okay, where are we making any sales? It's Amazon. Let's optimize there. So then the next port of call is the listings. If you go look at BeastGear's listings today, most of them are absolute garbage. So why are they garbage like a year into getting the brand back? Well, we have been fighting with Amazon over an intellectual property issue. So the account we sell through is the account I opened in 2016. It's brand registered. We have all the trademarks. Everything should be fine. But basically there is a glitch whereby there is a third-party selling account that belongs to Thrasio. It's a United States account. It has all the editing rights for our listings, and this issue hasn't been fixed yet. The reason it has the editing rights is this. When I sold BeastGear, they promised me they would launch in the US. And eventually they did, and it didn't go well. But rather than opening a new US account through our account, like Build International Listings, having an account owned by our entity, because they bought my entity, it wasn't an asset deal. They opened another account in the US. The BeastGear entity gave that account permissions to sell the brand, to represent the brand in the States. And so then that account had all the editing rights for the listings. Okay, fine. So why are the listings terrible? Well, that's just one of the red flags. Just absolute car crash of awful stuff on listings. Again, most of it's in episode 3, but we're talking about amateur errors like our own logo being wrong colors. We're talking about stuff that just doesn't make sense. So, a photograph of a lady with long painted pink nails wearing our boxing hand wraps. A good friend of mine is the first ever professional female boxer from Scotland. She would never dream of boxing with long painted nails on, right? Somebody wearing a boxing product whilst also simultaneously holding a weightlifting product. Just stuff that people in our images using a product from another brand when we sell that exact product and ours is better. Just absolute chaos. And stuff like that still appears on our listings today, which is probably why the recipe hasn't gone as well as we would have liked.
Yeah.
However, I did post about this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and much to my astonishment and delight, I received a phone call from a really nice lady from the Amazon Seattle office. She is looking into it for us. So I'm very hopeful that very soon this will get finally resolved.
Wow. Issues. But at least you got it back and you can resolve them. I want to talk about how you can legally protect yourself, maybe with performance clauses or other things that may have helped you if you did that. I don't even know if you did, but it's the bottom of the hour. And at the bottom of the hour, we do something a little bit different than some other podcasts. And that's called the Wheel of Kelsey. And that's where our guest provides a gift at the top of the hour. Ben, what is that giveaway today?
Sure. It's a free copy of my book. So my book is called Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand. It's a guide to go from idea to exit for a consumer product e-commerce brand. Can be selling on Amazon, doesn't have to be, can be D2C, all sorts of things. And I'd love to give away a copy.
Perfect. All right. And what we can do, we've done this before. I talked to Kevin and he said that we could give away a 3-month package to BDSC, which is it's incredible, by the way, the sessions that these guys or what Kevin's putting on. Every Wednesday, I think I either get in, watch, or receive some incredible summaries about who's presenting. And it's not just about Amazon. It's about right across the board. So check it out. It's called $1 Billion Sellers Club and BDSC. And it's about $100 a month of value. So we could do that for 3 months. Okay, so that's it. If you're interested, it's hashtag Wheel of Kelsey. Tag two people, you get a second entry. And like we have changed this up a little bit, this giveaway will be done next week because we want the people on our newsletter to get the chance to also try to enter. So when you get our newsletter at lwn.news, you can actually create an entry, and then next week, next Wednesday, we'll draw for the prize. So I think it's a great prize. And we also have a 50% discount for people for your course. Is that right?
That's right. If you use the code NORM at product-empire.com, you'll get it 50% off. And it's a $1,000 course. It is not an Amazon course. It's a brand building course which tips its hat to Amazon.
Yep.
So if you're kind of selling on Amazon or looking to launch on Amazon, and you're kind of stuck in the Amazon goldfish bowl, and you want to pivot from being an Amazon business to a real brand, that is for you. That's at product-empire.com, and use code NORM.
All right, fantastic. All right, Kels, let's go to a sponsor and we'll come right back. Did you know Amazon profit is more than revenue minus ads? Seller Board calculates your true profitability, factoring in every fee, return, shipping cost, and even cost of goods using FIFO logic. That's first in, first out logic. Plus, they automate your PPC, forecast inventory, and avoid stockouts, reclaim money with Amazon reimbursements, set FBM shipping by period, and track Walmart profits with the same dashboard. And you don't even have to have an Amazon account. You can try it for free for 2 months. Seller Board. Know your numbers, scale your business. Okay, let's get into protecting your business. Now, you did something a little bit different. Most people sell their assets. You sold everything.
Yeah.
Why?
So let me give people a bit of context here. So after I exited B-Skier, when I sold B-Skier, I worked with one of the sort of the generic listing sites, and they made a catalog of errors, and one of them nearly cost me £500,000. And my accountant, Alison, who's fantastic, tidied up their mess, and we got the deal done. And we looked at each other, Alison and I, and we said, there's a gap to fill here. So we founded Ecom Brokers. So we're a boutique M&A advisory come brokerage come investment bank specializing in e-commerce. So I have in the last 5 years learned a great deal about M&A, having seen under the hood of so many deals. So yes, I did sell the entity. That is very common for someone with a UK business, because if we sell our entity, we get tax relief. There's something over here called entrepreneurs relief, whereby at the time I sold, it was actually on the first 10 million. It's been cut now to only the first million, but on the first million, you only pay 10% capital gains tax rather than 20. Whereas if I sold the assets, I would have a much higher tax bill. Hence why I needed to sell the entity. I've got a client right now in Australia. They own a British entity, but if they don't sell the entity, the Australian government will tax them 47%.
Hey, it's like living in Canada. Come on.
It's crazy. I'm a bit of a wishy-washy liberal. I'm actually quite happy paying tax, provided it's not wasted. But also, the whole point of being an entrepreneur is we're the ones creating the value, the opportunity, the jobs, stimulating the economy. We've already paid corporation tax. Right. Why are we then getting taxed again? It's a bit like inheritance tax. I'm not cool with it. So yes, we have to sell the entity in the UK. And generally, very, very often, some American buyers and other international buyers who we deal with in our firm, when they realize they have to buy the entity, they're like, oh, I'm not too sure about this. But actually, very quickly, they realize it's not really that big of a deal. It requires a little extra due diligence on the buyer's side, because they are going to inherit the liability.
Right, exactly.
But provided that it can be demonstrated, well, there isn't really anything to worry about. And of course, there's got to be warranties from the seller as well. It's not really too much of a headache. They can set up overnight a new limited company to buy the UK limited company. They can keep owning it that way if they wish, or if they wish, they can sell the assets into their own US entity if they wish to.
I just want to stress this to anybody who's listening. And I made this mistake, and it cost me a lot. A deal just fell through where I could have retired, and I am still working. But go and get advice. If it costs you $500, if it costs you $2,500, if it costs you $5,000, it's worth every penny. Now I'm talking about legal advice, accounting, and tax.
Yep.
Go to a consultant that's an expert in this, and you'll thank me. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a tax consultant. All I'm saying is that if you build the structure of your company properly at the beginning, just like you said, Ben, if you sell the entity, you would have paid a lot more by selling the assets. If you didn't know that, you probably would have taken a different deal. But I don't want to just dwell on this, but it's so important that you do it. And it might be a little thing right now, but as it grows, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more as well. So look into it. It's so important.
There's a phrase that I like. I used it in my book. Cheap is expensive. Expensive is cheap.
Yeah,
If you go cheap now, it's going to be more expensive later.
absolutely.
Get it right first time. Pay for expert advice. And that's across the board. That's everything from marketing to taxes.
Yeah, it's a whole other podcast.
Yes.
It's a whole other podcast, but just make sure if you haven't done it and you're thinking about it, or you're holding back because it's a little bit costly, it'll be a hell of a lot more costly in the end. That, we talk about patent attorneys and trademarks, pay for them. Just don't do them yourself, because someday, it's not when, it's not if, it's when somebody comes back on you, and you won't want to pay those I'll just call them Amazon taxes. It's another learning model. So let's move on to something else. We know that you started to see negative reviews, but when did you really notice that the brand's performance was just tanking?
A very interesting thing happened called COVID. And that worked in my favor in many ways, because it worked in the favor of many brands, regardless of category. But because we were strength and conditioning equipment, predominantly gear that you could fit in your gym bag. And a lot of what we did, you could use at home, just on its own, or in your home gym. Therefore, when COVID hit, suddenly a lot of people wanted to buy our stuff. A few of our products didn't work at home, but everything else went insane, which is partly why I wish I'd sold. I sold in Halloween 2019. If I'd sold 6 months later, the business probably would have been maybe twice as big, and the multiple would have been probably twice as big too. But you don't know what you don't know, right? I couldn't have predicted that. And so things went great for the first year, money-wise, which in hindsight was because the momentum I had built with all the systems I had built for most of that year was still working, because they didn't start doing all the really crazy, stupid stuff, turning off website, email marketing, chatbots. Even some of my team members running the Instagram stuff were still there for a good chunk of that first year. So all the DMs to the customers, the customer service emails outside of Amazon, actually, building relationships with our customers, all still worked. But it all started to drop off. And so by year 2, things were not looking good financially. We were not going to hit our earnout target. And I was already frustrated by that point at all the stuff that I could see not working. And then it came out in the wash in the form of poor financial performance.
Seeing your brand kind of collapse, I know when, businesses don't work, you have a failure. There's always an emotional impact that happens to that. Or when you sell the company, I've sold companies and just fell into a deep depression. I got the money, but sitting on the couch watching 3 or 4 shows of Judge Judy every day for a few months, until you get that oomph back to get working again. But what was that on you? Like, what was the emotional impact?
For about 5 minutes, I flirted with the idea of going back to my old day job. But I realized, no, like I am an entrepreneur. I can't work for anybody else. I really wanted to stay in the industry. I realized that I loved consumer product. I loved e-commerce. I'd enjoyed the process of selling. It was very interesting. I'd learned a lot. The first entrepreneurial itch that there was to scratch was, like I said before, was e-com brokers. At the same time, I had ideas for new products. And I've worked on various brands since then, some more successful than others. I started consulting, and I consult with clients now, and I have, for some of them, I actually take, if it goes well, I end up taking an equity stake in those so that I got some skin in the game. I remember the day the money landed in my bank account. It was crazy. I'd never seen that much money. But at the same time, I don't think money changes you. It just amplifies you and amplifies what you can do. And so I still have goals as an entrepreneur, and I have goals like post entrepreneurship. I think once I've kind of burned through this entrepreneurial gunpowder, I want to do other stuff. You know, my old career was I was an environmental advisor in oil and gas, and my original background was environmental conservation. I want to eventually use entrepreneurial spirit to help with conservation, in particular rewilding. I'm kind of really into that. So Scotland and the UK in general, we killed all our main apex predators. So wolves, lynx, bears, all gone. I would love one day in the future to be involved in the rewilding of Scotland and the UK more generally. Sorry, I went on a ramble there.
No problem. Yeah, they did that. It's funny that you touch on that because the deer population went crazy here. I live just about 2 hours outside of Toronto, and so they introduced cougars.
Well,
Yeah, they had the radio monitors on, but within days or months, they had two of them got loose, and now they were just wandering around doing whatever. Like we lived in a town, and my wife's looking out the back window one day. We have a pool, but you could see over top, and through the gate there was a cougar just looking at our
whoa.
backyard.
You're
It's
like,
great. It was crazy, but
maybe don't go outside today.
yeah, that's exactly it. Maybe not, maybe not today. But okay, let's talk about when your brand all of a sudden you said, this is enough." You
Yeah.
went to Thrasio, they said no. You saw that bundle, that portfolio being sold off. But when was it? What was it that got your brand back on your radar? And why didn't you just move to a different brand?
Yeah, multiple reasons. So if somebody came to me and said, Ben, should I, and I had no emotional connection whatsoever. I had nothing to do with Beast Gear, and they were just said, Ben, what do you think of this? Should I buy it? I'd say no. There is absolutely no doubt that part of this is emotional.
Yeah.
I also think that that's okay. Like, life doesn't always have to be based around purely sort of rational financial decisions. Part of it was I do see an opportunity to improve it and sell it later. And part of it is I wanted to use it as an opportunity to do something cool in the industry. So in our industry, there's a lot of people who don't talk about their brands because they're paranoid, or don't talk about their brands because they're liars and they don't have a brand, or they had something and it failed. And they've managed to sort of engineer themselves into this position of authority, but actually they're kind of a bit of a fraud. I can't call them out publicly because that would be career suicide. But what I can do is just concentrate on what I'm doing and do cool stuff. And so I think rebuilding this in public is interesting content that people want. Certainly, I've had reasonably good feedback on it so far, and I thought it'd be a fun project. It would keep me accountable to what we're doing to try and turn it around. I would get to meet new people that I would have onto the channel, which we're going to be doing over time, and it helps me build my. I hate this phrase; it's so corny, but my personal brand, which is something I want to do because ultimately that's an insurance policy. Like, if I can build a brand where people realize that I know what I'm talking about, even if all my businesses go tits up tomorrow, then I've got that, right, and that gives you something. So yeah, I wanted to do that, and there it is.
Grow a beard. So okay, this and I know we have to wrap up fairly soon, so I saved the best question for last. And it's the common warning signs. So there's sellers out there right now that are going out and talking, they want to sell their business. What are some of the warning signs they need to look at when they're dealing with an aggregator?
Honestly, for most deals that are getting done now, and I know this because we're doing them with ecom brokers, they're not aggregator deals. Like, most deals now, you're going to sell your business and you're going to sell it to another person like you, or it's going to be a small strategic deal. By that, I don't mean like some big strategic player is going to come and eat up your brand, unless it's big enough, of course, but it's going to be somebody else in your space who wants to just buy their competition. And they might, if you're American, they might be doing it through an SBA loan or otherwise getting financing, and there's plenty of financing providers around. But some red flags then for an aggregator or any buyer really is look at their existing, ask them what is their existing portfolio. Go look at that and have a look at what they're doing. Reverse engineer their marketing funnels. Go look at what they're doing on their meta ads, their social media. Sign up for their email list. Go look at what their Amazon presence actually looks like. Go do some digging and use some of the databases to go find their factories. And just look at things in there that make you feel uncomfortable, that you don't like, that show that they're not really the real deal. That's what I would want to see. I'd want you to be interviewing the prospective buyers and asking what their vision is. How are they funding the deal? What's the deal structure going to look like? We want to make sure that the deal structure is protective to the seller, so that if it's not going well, for instance, on an earnout, we want to make sure that there's actually like tranches and a ladder there, so that if target A isn't met, well, you're still going to get paid because target B was met, for instance. Or if a portion of the deal is going to be seller financing, this has never happened to a deal we've done, but I've heard about it happening, whereby somebody sold their business. So let's say they sold it for like 70% cash, and the rest was on a seller note. And then the buyer, it didn't go well. The buyer then defaulted on one of the monthly seller note payments. By defaulting on that payment, immediately that triggers that the rest of the seller note is immediately due. And they were unable to then pay that. So the seller got the business back. So they got 70% for it. Then they got the business back. Okay, the business wasn't doing as well anymore, because that's why they defaulted on the loan. Nonetheless, they got it back. They knew what to do. They were able to fix it and then sell it again. So, it's not really what you're not aiming for that, but of course, sometimes it does work out that way.
Wow, that's a deal.
Actually, whoever wins my book, the last chapter of the book it's all about exiting your business. So that's worth a read.
Where can they get the book? Did you give the link over to Kels?
It's on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and search Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand, or go to quitstalling.buildyourbrand.com, I can give Kelsey a link, which will just take you directly to the actual listing on Amazon.
Okay, perfect. All right. So that's it for today's podcast. We're going to go over to a sponsor, but Ben, thanks for coming on the 6th, 7th, or 8th time.
Pleasure. Yeah, always good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on. Love everything you've done for the community. Can't believe you've been doing this for so long now. And always love speaking with you.
Oh, and you too. So we're going to remove you, but don't go away. Are you an Amazon seller that checked out your listing and said, it should be doing better? What am I doing wrong? There's got to be a better way. Well, guess what? There probably is. You just haven't had someone tell you exactly what's working and what's not. Flat World Network is for frustrated Amazon sellers. We'll take a look at your listing, your rank, your PPC, your traffic, and guess what? We're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your listing. And if you're interested, we'll even fix it for you. So if you're serious about scaling, go to flatworldnetwork.com and book your free audit today. All right. So let's go over to the wheel.
So this is for Jassim Issa's profit analysis audit. So I'm going to shuffle these up. And if you are the winner, please email me k@lunchwithnorm.com. And it looks like...
Marina.
Oh, maybe not. Steve.
Oh, Steve got it.
So Steve, you won last week's Jassim Issa's profit analysis audit. So just send me over an email, k@lunchwithnorm.com, and we'll set you up. And for the giveaway for Ben, that's happening next week. So we'll spin that again and see who the winner is. So congratulations, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, we couldn't do this without our sponsors, but we couldn't do this without you. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Lunch with